I'm so happy to have back on the show Noah Ernst. Thanks for coming back, Noah.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. And I was going to do a little context for people. You were on the show before you ran for Portland City Council, District 1,
Right?
and you actually came very close, I would
Oh
say,
yeah, I
to.
was I was super happy with how we did. I mean, obviously winning is better than not winning, but for someone who started out with no name recognition, no history in politics, not from an advocacy background, to come in essentially tied with Terrence Hayes for fourth in a district with 15 people running, I felt really, really good about that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. I was going to say, you had a very, in my opinion, light campaign footprint. Like you said, you just kind of tried to do this just on your, very little help and assistance, and you just jumped in and.
yeah, I think
So.
that yeah, that's true. But it also, when you're the first time you've run, I think a lot of people sort of hang back in support until they see who you are and what you're about.
Yeah.
So
And it's hard to go up against some of these folks that have been in the nonprofit world for
yeah,
a decade
it
or
is.
and been writing opinions in the newspaper for a long time and stuff. But yeah, anyway, I just wanted to mention that because you are here now to run for a Metro Council seat,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Um, and I was gonna say, yeah, I'm gonna hit the high button because you're my first Metro candidate ever on the
Yay.
show. It's kind of nerdy because like people may not even know what I'm talking about with Metro, but yeah, I guess give people like a quick bio about yourself and like why you decided to run for Metro Council.
Okay, so I currently work as a superintendent and in-house counsel at Radio Cab Company. I've lived my entire life all over small towns, Western Oregon, Western Washington. My dad was in the plywood industry, mills closed. We moved a lot, but went graduated high school in Snohomish, Washington, which is up by Everett. Went to Central Washington University, and then my dad and I had a small business for a few years, and I we moved down to Eugene, Oregon. Went to the University of Oregon School of Law and practiced law actively. I mean, I'm still an active attorney, but actively as a lawyer for about 10 years until the Great Recession. And I got laid off because the company I worked for and the job that I did was construction defect litigation predominantly. And we represented contractors and developers. And of course, if nobody's building anything,
Right.
there's no contract work on the front end and there's no defect litigation on the back end. And so I ended up driving cab because my feeling always is that you just got to do what you got to do, and ended up being superintendent there. And so I've always been, interested in what's going on in the world. And as a superintendent at Radio Cav, I've spent a lot of time working with the city and especially PBOT and that sort of thing. So getting more involved, and ran for city council, like you said, for the east side of Portland, and really got much more in tune with what's going on and what are the important issues for the city, but also the region,
Mm-hmm.
and the sense, of course, that we have on the east side of Portland, that sort of the downtown Southwest Hills part that's really run the city for forever doesn't understand or really care about what goes on out here on the east side. And so didn't win. I mean, I think we put on a really, really good effort, and I'm really proud of how well I did and how well that my team did. And decided, kept looking. I had a rough 2025, so I sort of sat on the sidelines, but I'm paying attention and watching, and I thought I don't want to wait 4 years because District 1
Mm.
was one of the ones that had a 4-year term. I don't want to
Right.
wait 4 years to get back out there and to say, hey, there's places where we can make a difference. And so I looked at Metro, and some of the people who got to know me from my 2024 city council race
Mm-hmm.
came to me and said, hey, let's look at Metro, because we really felt that there was a chance there. There's a lot of the same issues. There's a chance there to unseat the incumbent, because we feel like he comes from that advocacy background that really reflects the wants, needs, desires of that downtown core of, sort of far left liberal policy that doesn't reflect a huge amount of the voters in East Metro, right? Which is, East Multnomah County is the district. It's also District 1. just for ease.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's Gresham, it's Tualatin, it's
Right.
all that area out the unincorporated Multnomah County,
Yeah, maybe even some McClackamas County out
a
there. Yeah.
little bit of Clackamas
Yeah.
County,
Yeah.
and it just all on the east side. And I'm hearing already from people that they feel lack, the same things that the East Portland feels, East County feels, right?
Right, right.
And so that got me motivated and excited, and I decided to run.
Awesome. Yeah. No, there's a couple good like kind of tie-ins there that I was going to bring up, and one of them is like, first of all, if people are scratching their heads, I guess, or whatever, like, what is Metro? I'll give my little quick thing, and then I was gonna like, how do you explain to people what it is? But for me, it's like, it's a regional government, in my understanding. If you guys want to go back and check out the episode I did with Lynn Peterson,
Mm,
she used to be the president. She just recently left Metro, but she explained it to me that like most regional areas with over a certain population and have high transportation needs have to set up a regional government.
yeah,
And also, I know, like we were talking a second ago, Oregon passed some stuff in the legislature to kind of create Metro back in
yeah,
the day. Um, and that's kind of what I know about it. I also know that they run the zoo, they do kind of trash collection, sanitation, a
yeah.
bunch of other things. They buy land. But how do you explain it to
I
people?
think that's a good explanation. Metro, I describe it as it's an overarching regional government entity across the tri-counties, right? So it's Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties, and that it does do very specific things like run the zoo. They don't do trash collection; they sort of regulate trash collection, which
Okay.
isn't quite the same thing.
So there's
Um,
operators and they just
yeah, and they
regulate
and
it.
they yeah bid for areas and things, but a huge part of what they do is supposed to be coordinating with all the different regional governments in the area to have cohesive things like a
Right.
transportation planning, and they regulate monitor the urban growth boundary. They do things like that, so they're very involved in housing and development through at least that part of it. They
Land
do they
use, you
do
might say.
land they do buy and manage land, um, in theory, I think, to ensure that there's available developable land for growth within the urban growth boundaries. They a few years ago they passed that 1% tax,
The SH,
and
supportive housing services or homeless
that
services.
one homeless services, and so they're spending money to, in theory, end homelessness.
Right, right.
And they do also they have another tax that goes to affordable housing.
Hmm.
And they've got a program for building affordable housing units. But yeah, they have their fingers in a lot of pies. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I would totally agree with you too, and I think about you're saying the whole point is to kind of connect these counties, because I feel like that being the sort of overall mission, it doesn't seem like that's really what they do to me. Like I feel like they should be doing that more. But I was gonna say you seem like a unique kind of good fit for that because of like you were just saying, we have this same kind of problem with even in Portland, East County kind of being forgotten.
right,
Like I've worked with smaller governments in Metro that aren't anywhere near Portland, and
right.
they feel like it's very Multnomah centric. All they care about is Multnomah County. Clackamas feels forgotten. All these other counties feel forgotten. So I feel like you bring that same thing you were trying to bring to the city from East County
Right.
to Metro to be like, look, there's more here than just Multnomah County.
Well, I hope so. I mean, that's my goal. And like in the city council race, I'm very much motivated to run on the idea that the thing that you do as an elected representative is represent the people who
Right.
elected you.
Right.
And that doesn't mean, I mean, we see with a lot of this really partisan stuff that they just think it means the people who actually voted for them. But it means if you represent a district in Metro, that you should be listening to and responding to the needs of that district, right? And that doesn't mean you're not aware. I want to be aware of the overall,
Right.
but you also have to be aware of the ways in which your district is different, the ways in how the people in that district want things that are maybe different than other districts, and how the policies that may work in one part of Metro don't necessarily work in that part, and
Mm-hmm.
how do you do that? And so I saw a lot of that in the city council race with East Portland, where you've had people historically who don't ever go past 205,
Right,
right?
right,
Well, I think unfortunately, what you're saying is exactly correct. It's very, very easy in a government, a regional area where Portland and Multnomah County are in theory the biggest economic entities there, and they have the most people and they have the most weight, um, to sort of neglect those other areas um, and not consider as much as you could how the policies work differently and affect people differently out there. So that's really why I want to run. It's not that I'm not interested in the entirety, but I really am interested in representing that group of people, understanding what makes East County different than the rest of Metro, understanding why policies that might work somewhere else in Metro don't work out there,
right.
and giving them a voice that I really believe they haven't had.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's, I think you do, even the previous race you were
Mm,
in and this race, I think you do a great job of like highlighting what people actually want in that district, not
right.
what the bureaucrats want to
Well,
tell them they need
and I really believe when you look at a lot of policies that we get from our regional governments, it's very top down,
mm-hmm.
right? So people come in, they come from an advocacy background, they have ideas about how things should be. They get elected, and then it's I'm going to impose those things I already believe on Portland,
The
on
public. Yeah,
Multnomah County, on Metro. And I believe it's great to have ideas about how things should be. I have ideas about how things you have ideas about how things should be. But um in a representative democracy, it should be coming up from the bottom in a very real way,
right,
right? Which is I should be teaching you as an elected official, leading you towards what you want, what the best results are, how I can make your life better. And that just has to involve listening to the people out there and not just assuming you already know, and I don't care if you want it. I don't care if you think it's wrong. I don't
right.
care. Now, the mass isn't always right, but they're always your voters. They're always the people you represent, and they need to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think specifically with your kind of transportation background,
Hmm.
it's really like, I've worked in some of these smaller cities where like they just kind of have this default attitude to be like, well, we're going to go with whatever the Portland transportation consultants have to
Yeah,
say. Like that's their default
right,
transportation planning.
right.
And, I think for some people that works, but I much prefer your kind of methodology of like, let's listen to the people and what they're
Well,
asking
and
for.
I
And,
think we talked about transportation quite a bit the last time I was
yeah,
here, and it
yeah,
is it is an area that um, I'm a little bit passionate about, obviously through being a cab driver,
yeah,
and driving.
yeah.
I mean, not just as a part as a superintendent, but a person who drove all over the city.
Right.
But also, you start
And
to
drove other people too.
and drove other
Yeah.
people too. The federal Department of Transportation years ago adopted this Vision Zero policy as this is how we should do transportation around the country. And this is 20 years ago now.
Mm,
It was based on programs from Europe. And the problem has been one that they didn't seem to ever assess the differences between European cities and American cities. And so they're taking a program that worked very well in cities that had really, really strong developed public transportation systems, and countries that weren't built around the car like the United States was, and different things. And then they just superimpose it on the United States. And what we've seen over the last 20 years, and studies all over the country show this, is that it hasn't worked, right? They have told you that this was going to get people into public transportation. This was going to reduce traffic fatalities. That's the Vision Zero part, right?
mm-hmm.
Visualize zero traffic fatalities. It's going to get people on the bicycles. It's going to do these things, and it hasn't. None of those things have happened in virtually any city in the United States that's adopted it. That is also the policy of the city of Portland. That's also the policy of Metro. That's also the policy of these counties. And so that's that sense of this top-down approach,
Right,
right?
right.
We don't And I've always been frustrated when it comes to transportation policy, especially, is why doesn't anybody care that it isn't working?
Right.
Why
Because
doesn't anybody care?
we've spent also a ton of
We
money on
spend a
it.
ton of money on it,
Right.
a ton of money. And
And one thing I always say is, traffic fatalities have increased. I know there was just
yeah,
a recent story that they dipped a little bit, but since the program started,
yeah,
it's
they've
the
doubled.
math
They
is there.
doubled
Yeah.
since the city of Portland adopted it.
Right.
Metro's own data shows that they're increased by 30%. They've only started coming down in the city of Portland because the city of Portland finally reinstated traffic patrols,
Mm.
right? Because look at the if you look at the data about what's causing traffic fatalities, right? The two biggest causes of traffic fatalities are people who are intoxicated, which Vision Zero and all those programs do nothing about.
Mm.
They can't.
Mm-hmm.
And people who are already violating the speed limit. So if somebody's already going 50 and a 30, reducing the speed limit to 20 isn't going to change that.
Mm-hmm.
And what does change it is enforcement. And
Also, I'm gonna have Eric Fruits on here soon to do a big new economic episode. But he
right,
always brings up, um, like a lot of these greenways and things that were like Hawthorne is a
right,
great example in Portland. They purposefully put a lot of bike traffic next to car traffic, even though there's adjacent, like
yeah,
actual residential
right.
areas where they could go through. And to me, that just seems like a disastrous concept to be like,
And
instead of segregating the bikes and the cars, like just put them together.
I will
Like,
tell you that that is absolutely what the data shows.
yeah,
Is that if you put if you increase the amount of bicycle traffic on a major thoroughfare, and you try to increase the amount of pedestrians on a major thoroughfare, what you do is increase the number of interactions, we'll call them,
right.
between motor vehicles and bicycles and
And
pedestrians.
some of those motor vehicles
And
could even be a bus,
right,
but it's just
but
the nature of it. Yeah.
the reality is, and this is obvious and common sense, if you have an interaction between a motor vehicle and a bicyclist, the motor vehicle wins. If you
Right.
have a interaction between a motor vehicle and a pedestrian, the motor vehicle
Right.
wins. Now,
It's never the opposite. Yeah.
it's never the opposite. And so what you end up with, and the data shows this from different cities, is that you end up with more bicyclists getting hit. You end up with more pedestrians getting hit. And when you look at the streets and how they get redesigned, what you end up with is really, really frustrated motorists
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
are no longer calm. They're angry. They're mad. They're doing more less predictable things.
Right. Right. They're
They're not
trying to just navigate the
right.
street, which a lot of times look like
And I know,
confusing.
I know that it's a Portland example, but look at Division. Go up to 101st and drive east on Division. It's a nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. And they've put medians all the way down the middle so you can't turn left. They've put a protected bike lane on the right, so you can't get over out of the way. So now when I've talked to police and fire, they don't use it anymore. Right, a street that used to be the fastest way to get to an emergency,
Mm-hmm.
cars can't get out of your way now. So there's
Yeah.
literally,
And
they don't use it.
it kind of has the, traffic calming is a term that gets brought up in a lot of these transportation
Right.
planning, but a lot of those kind of concepts like speed bumps and this kind of stuff, it ends up rerouting that traffic to the residential areas because
Well,
people don't want to take those.
absolutely.
That's what you're
Absolutely.
saying. Yeah.
And the other thing is with Division, with those giant long medians, and we talked about this last time,
Yeah. Yeah.
the number of businesses that have gone out
Right.
under,
Right.
because
Yeah.
if
You can't
if
pull up
your
and
customers
park.
can't turn into your business,
Yeah.
they either keep driving or they go somewhere else.
Right.
And so if you go up Division now, you'll see all these businesses that are not in business anymore. And
Yeah.
when I talked to business owners along that street, 2 years ago, a huge number of them were like, I'm trying to move my business. I'm going to wait till the end of my lease. And the ones that own their buildings feel stuck because they could move, but nobody wants to buy their commercial building in that infrastructure setting,
Yeah.
right? Because they understand that you can't get customers
Right.
in,
Right. It's not a good high traffic kind of area for
right.
that. I might jump all over the place here,
That's all right.
but since we're talking transportation, I did have on here, and maybe this is partially in your district, but I'm really fascinated with this. 82nd, there's this big looming lane reduction. They want to put a permanent bus lane basically all the way up through 82nd.
Yeah.
There's been a bunch of press about it. A lot of businesses and people on 82nd don't want this.
Right.
Kind of like we were just talking about. This is like
It's
one of these
and
examples of
that's
like they're just putting in their vision
right,
over the people's
right,
desire. Yeah.
absolutely. And um,
But I was just curious your
it's
thoughts on that.
interesting to me because, of course, the incumbent, one of his biggest pride things that he's proud of on Metro Council is, of course, 82nd Avenue project, and he brought in, or claims,
Okay.
it takes credit. We'll say that for
Right, because
bringing
it's
in for
TriMet's
bringing.
thing, right? Isn't it mostly TriMet's thing, or I don't even
No,
know.
no, it's
It's
Metros.
Metro. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And he's proud of bringing in 150 million federal dollars for it and stuff like that. And
I guess it'd
it's
have to be Metros because it crosses Clackamas
well,
in
and they took over.
Multnomah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
So and my experience is, I mean, there's a couple of things related to 82nd now. My experience is that I have never spoken to somebody who wants what's going on Metro or on 82nd Avenue.
Yeah.
Now, I obviously certain types of people don't talk to me. Other types of people do. I don't know how representative a sample that is, but when you get 100%,
Right.
it
Right.
seems to be meaningful to me. Everybody I ever talked to said the only thing they wish anybody would do with 82nd Avenue is actually pave it because
Right.
it's just, I mean, you've
Yeah.
driven on 82nd
Yeah.
Avenue. Um, I don't want to come across that I object to bicycle infrastructure and pedestrian infrastructure or even public transportation, which I don't. I'm a huge fan of all of those things. I think public transportation is something that municipalities should provide as a service to their citizens, right? But what I also believe is you can't punish people for driving, right? There's certain streets in Portland, in Multnomah County, in Clackamas County, in Washington County, in Metro, that are thoroughfares
Hmm.
that move people to where they need to go. And they want to turn these thoroughfares into local streets. 82nd Avenue was a highway,
Right.
right? It
Yeah.
was a highway. It was about moving people.
Yeah. And if you
And,
look at it, you're right. I mean, it is a thoroughfare, and it's like it
but,
goes
but
basically
look,
from the mall in Clackamas to the airport. It's
right,
very long.
right. And so,
So it's not a local street to me. I don't know. It's
no,
like
but that's what they want it to be. And to me, there has to be in a metropolitan area ways in which people can move around efficiently. And those historically have been our major thoroughfares, right? They have been Powell, they have been 82nd Avenue, they've been 122nd, they've been Division, they've been Gleason, right? And those are the streets that if you look at the plans of Vision Zero advocates or whoever, as they call the high risk streets,
right.
right? The high accident
High
street
crash
that
corridors.
high
Yeah.
crash corridors.
Yeah.
And to me, all they've identified is these are the places with the most cars,
Mm.
which makes perfect sense, right? It doesn't take a mathematical genius to understand that if you choose the streets that have 90% of the traffic, you're going to choose the streets that have 90% of the accidents,
Right. Right.
right? Doesn't mean accidents are horrible. It just means you have identified a problem that doesn't exist, right? It's just statistical likelihood.
Right. You've identified
But
a popular area.
a popular area, exactly right. It's like saying, uh, anyway, there's so many metaphors, but what they're doing, and they've done it on Gleason, and they've done it on Division, and they've done it on all these different. They want to do it on 122nd. They want to do it on 102nd. They're doing it on Powell. They've done it all these places. Is try to make it into a local street which means nobody can move. Right? They become parking lots.
Yeah.
Division is a parking lot, and it's dangerous. They want to take out bus lanes on 87 or put in bus lanes, sorry, on 82nd.
Yeah.
So you're going to be one.
I was going to say, yeah,
that's going to be a parking lot.
I was going to
It's gonna
explain to
absolute
people
parking lot.
and I'll put the headlines and stuff up, but that's, essentially my understanding is, yeah, all of 82nd would basically be one lane of normal traffic
And one
and a
designated
permanent bus lane.
yeah. Now I believe
Which if you just picture that in your head, if you ever driven on 82nd, you're like, yeah, you can picture how that'd be
it's a nightmare.
gridlock. Yeah.
Yeah, right. And so what will happen and what happens on a lot of these streets is exactly what you say. Why would I not jog up to 93rd or 92nd?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Which is all residential.
Right. There's schools.
There's
next
schools,
to
there's
it,
all this stuff,
yeah.
but it's not going to have the same, will now have the same kind of congestion, or they're going to hop over to 205,
Right.
depending on where you're coming from. And why not? Well, what does that do to I'll just drop into this place business on 82nd Avenue? Goes away because people are would only go on 82nd Avenue if they have to.
Right.
Now, that's not good for anybody. I mean, it's good for the buses, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah,
But as one of the, so I've had this same discussion because these policies, this is the policy all over the metro area
right.
with people out in Gresham, and they say it's great. What you have is a really fast, efficient, empty bus and slow cars. Well, who does that benefit? And TriMet just announced they're cutting
Right, right.
bus
Yeah,
lanes in the on the east
yeah.
side.
I was gonna say the whole thing is it's strange to me because yeah, like I talk about this all the time. TriMet ridership has been way down
It's
since 2019
yeah,
levels. They have not recovered that, and they have things like the West Train, which are absolutely empty, and they
right.
spend a fortune on that. People don't even know what that is, but that's a permanent train that's out in Tualatin and all that stuff. But so they have all these like suffering projects, but then they'll do stuff like this even though their ridership is down. And also they have a light rail line that goes to the
Right.
mall,
Right.
which also not a lot of people are riding. It's like, why don't they focus on
Well,
existing things that they've already built?
my feeling is, and this is why one of the reasons that these policies don't work in the United States is one of the cities in Europe that has incredible success with Vision Zero or those types of policies spent 50 years by building designated bike infrastructure,
Hmm.
separate, like we think of the different trails, just bikes,
Right. We're
right?
not combining the cars very
They
much.
have in a city that's far smaller than Portland, it's something like 10 times the amount of bike lane paths.
Hmm.
Well, of course people can bike safely, right? But you can't. What we have is, and now the name of the trail is going to escape me, but we have a trail, right? And now people are saying I can't ride on that because we got homeless camps along it, and they at
Yeah.
one point were setting up like clotheslines to take people off their bikes, and
You're
it's
talking
just,
about the Springwater
thank you,
corridor. Yeah.
Sprinkwater Corridor,
It's right over here.
yeah,
Yeah.
and those kinds of things, and you're like, the city is bigger. It's more spread out. You've spent less time building infrastructure historically and less money building the infrastructure, but then you want to impose, we're going to try to force you out of your car. It's not going to work. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked. And it hasn't done any of the things they said it was going to do, right?
Hmm.
Fatalities aren't down. People aren't in public transportation. People aren't riding their bikes and more.
Right. And I always bring this up too. I think it's like, especially for programs like Vision Zero and even the 80-second thing. The thing that these governments don't want to talk about is like post COVID,
Mm-hmm.
people just travel less. Like they don't get on public transit because they don't commute like they
Well,
used to.
that's absolutely
And I
true.
think in general, they just don't go out as much
But
as
the
they.
other thing that there is the huge problem with, and that is that the necessity, I think, of enforcement, just law enforcement, getting out there. And I understand historically the problems that people raise, but you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And what we've seen when they Portland reinstituted the traffic patrols is that fatalities went down, right? So we know it's effective, but what we're looking at on, let me tell you about my experiences on TriMet, right? I live just south of Burnside.
Okay.
So I can walk, well, it's a 15-minute walk because of how spaced out but I can walk to a Max stop. My wife and I went to see a show at the Moda Center, right? Straight line down that Max run. Perfect. So we walk up there and we, like 2 minutes before we get there, we see the Max go by. So we're like, oh crap, we got to wait 20 minutes,
Yeah,
right?
15 minutes or whatever.
The next one never showed up.
Oh.
We were there for 40 some minutes.
Even
No,
though on the ticker thing
yeah,
it said,
even though on the thing we said the next one's coming. A friend of mine actually drove by, saw us there, waved us down, drove us to the Moda Center. All right, well, not exactly a stellar start. I think you will agree. So we watch our show. We get on, the Max is there going back from the Moda Center. We get on the Max. We go one stop, and a homeless man gets on the Max, sits down across from us. I mean, with all his stuff and his parfum,
yeah.
takes off his shoes, pulls out a pocket knife, and starts scraping dead skin off his feet. And I'm not joking.
Wow.
And yeah, that's just, you're thinking to yourself, I don't want to ride this. This is not the experience I want to have. He wasn't threatening to us, but you feel like vomiting. I turned to Liz and I said, this reminds me of why when the Victorians learned about germs, they started wearing gloves everywhere.
Right.
Because you're like, and she says to me, and she is a much bigger advocate of public transportation than even I am. And she said, when we get home, don't sit on the couch, take off your clothes, put them in the laundry,
Mm.
because you're just, what am I sitting on?
Yeah.
What am I bringing into my house?
Yeah.
Because we see what's going on around us. And of course, there's garbage on the ground. I mean, all the usual stuff,
Yeah. I was
right?
gonna say at some point it does become like a
And so,
actual sanitation
yeah.
issue. You
And
know.
so then my wife got a new job, and she didn't, it's up on Pill Hill. She doesn't want to, you got to pay for parking up there. It's expensive. She didn't want to do it. And they will subsidize public transportation,
Mm-hmm.
right? So she catches the bus on outside our house on Stark, rides into downtown, and has to switch buses and goes up. Takes her an extra probably 45 minutes each way every day, but she's okay. It took 2 days before someone who was high and homeless, I don't know what assault is too strong a word, but harassed her on the bus,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And she's from New York, so she just considers harassment by strange people on public transportation as sort of character.
Part of it. Yeah.
But
Well,
that
yeah.
doesn't
It's like
make me comfortable.
no. I was just
I
say
would
it's
stop
a
riding. I mean,
legitimate issue for
right.
women
And
by themselves. You know.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And and so it's those kinds of experiences that what helps with that is enforcement. And Metro Council obviously is very involved. They don't run TriMet, they're very involved with TriMet. They give money to TriMet. Multnomah County deputy sheriffs are one of the largest organizations that does the TriMet, is part of that TriMet law enforcement team.
Mm-hmm.
So, and they endorsed me, by the way, for this election. And I just really think it's important for Metro to look at when they're giving money to TriMet, and how are we going to ensure, how are you ensuring that this is a safe place for people and a clean place for people, and what's those what's the measurable outcomes,
Right. Right.
so that those are the sorts of things, in my opinion, that will, it's not ruining the streets, it'll get people into public transportation. It's having public transportation that's clean, safe, and reliable,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because I would rather my wife sit in the car and pay extra money to park up on Pill Hill than get harassed by people and then harassed today and assaulted tomorrow. I don't know.
Right. Or
Right.
like you were saying in your first example, like
Right.
for me, it would totally, and I've ridden the Max and the bus for years,
Yeah.
but like when your first experience in a while, it's like, oh, it didn't even show up. I would
Right.
be like, I'm done with this.
Right.
Like, and it's
The
saying it's supposed to show up.
yeah,
That shit just frustrates me.
yeah, and well, especially when you know how much concerts in the Moda Center cost, and you
Right.
think
Yeah.
I'm not going to make it on
Right.
time
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
the
Or miss
Max.
some of it. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, and that's just, I think, a reality for a lot of people. And the other one, and you can debate how much local government has caused/failed to correct this. Downtown Portland is becoming a ghost town, right? But we built the Max, it appears to me, to get people from outside of Portland or outside the downtown area into downtown.
Right.
Everything goes to
Kind of the
downtown.
old bridge and tunnel concept of like
Right.
bring it all in. Yeah.
Right. Well, if people aren't going downtown anymore, and that's where your Maxes go, right? Because that's how they're built and it's hard to move tracks. They don't serve the people anymore if they're not going there in the same way that they did before. And so that's a problem too, right? Why would I ride the Max that goes up and down Division if it doesn't go where I need to go anymore,
Mm-hmm.
right? I don't need to go downtown. I try hard not to go downtown. So I think that's a problem with public transportation too. And then of course, when you cut bus lines and the buses aren't running consistently, and it's not because, I don't think, because of no designated bus lanes. It's, one of the interesting things about being in the taxi industry or transportation industry is the ways in which people move.
Yeah.
And so I know many drivers who drove for us who then went to work for TriMet, drove buses or drove the Max. And when they tell me things like, well, yeah, every time someone, lights up some fentanyl on the bus, they have to evacuate the bus. It has to air out for 15, 20, right? Every time that happens, right, the everything is delayed.
Right.
You're now waiting for buses that aren't coming.
Mm-hmm.
Those are real problems. And those are things that, again, having an increased law enforcement presence would help, as long as obviously we can try to avoid the kinds of negative um, interactions that obviously people are very concerned about with law enforcement, right? But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, it's just the whole 80-second thing. I think it's just like take care of some of this stuff and get ridership back, and then we can start talking
and then we
about,
can start when the
I just
buses.
feel like it's backwards,
I
they try to
agree. I agree.
impose what they want on people.
But going back to that, the other interesting thing about that is you have, and I think this is fundamental to the reason I'm running. You have a man who represents East County, and the thing he's most proud of his time on Metro Council is not in his district,
Hmm.
right?
Which doesn't make
That's a
sense.
red flag to me. Like,
Yeah.
why, even if that's the biggest project that you've worked on by virtue of the fact that that's Metro's biggest project, fine. But to me, you should be most proud of the representation that you've done for the people of your district. You should be most proud of the contacts you've made, the people that you've met, the way in which you have built community so that you can, represent those people and advocate for what they want, right? When I hear from people that in 4 years they've never seen him at and we're not talking small associations, we're talking bigger associations in Gresham, in Tualatin, in Tigard, or not Tigard, so Fairview. That's a problem, right? That says where your focus is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really one of the reasons, again, one of the things that really motivates me to run is, first of all, I don't believe that the people along 82nd want what's going on there, but also it's not, those aren't your
Right.
people,
Right.
right? Those
It's just
aren't,
kind of a big shiny object that you can say, "Hey, look what
yeah,
I'm
look what
doing
I
over
did.
here." Even though, like, from what I've seen, it seems like pretty overwhelming opposition to that project, especially
Well, and this is,
along 82nd. All
yeah,
the
absolutely. And the hard part is, of course, if you go to the Metro website, they will say that they did a survey that show that 70% of the people surveyed think that there should be bus lanes, dedicated bus lanes. 1,400 people responded. Now, the thing that occurs to me immediately is this is the problem when you have a person whose day job is advocacy,
Mhm.
who's also supposed to be a representative. Because do I know in any way that he immediately called all the people in his advocacy social circle and said, respond to this survey?
Right.
No, I don't know that.
But they're
Right.
probably the ones that
But
subscribe to that email.
yeah, they subscribe to the right. Have you ever known that Metro
No,
was
yeah.
doing a survey?
Right. Yeah.
Have anybody else known? Right.
Yeah.
You have to be watching their website. And so I just don't believe the results. And that's backed up by the fact that you talk to anybody, especially businesses along 82nd Avenue, especially people who drive on 82nd Avenue,
Yeah, I've heard even
and nobody wants it.
yeah,
I
employees at all these places are
don't
like,
want it.
I don't know how I would even get to work, really,
Right.
and
And so that's the thing that's really that disconnect between, if it's top down and you're not listening,
yeah.
right?
I think that's a
Then you can think that everybody wants this.
I think it's a real problem, probably along the whole West Coast, but specifically here in our region, of like commissioning studies or surveys
Hmm.
that just come out in your favor. It's like, oh, magically every time we do these surveys or
Right.
studies, it has the outcome that we wanted.
Right.
Isn't that funny?
Isn't that
And
amazing?
that's just kind of how these governments operate
Well,
up here.
and
And
I
it's
don't know
like,
how the questions were worded. Obviously, that's a huge factor.
right, yeah,
Right. But
yeah,
I do know that when you have specific groups of people who are very, very motivated and very, um, very, organized, and you say, there's this survey coming up that's supposed to be measuring X, and we want it to say, we want it to come out a certain way, and they get all their people to fill out the survey when the mass of people are not part of some organized group. They're not, or they're
yeah,
not
yeah,
watching Metro or watching City Council or watching Peabody or watching whatever. They're going about their lives,
right,
and so they end up not getting surveyed.
yeah,
Right? They end up not participating in the process because the process wasn't really truly designed for their participation.
yeah,
It was designed to get, like you say, to get the results that the people who are advocating for these programs want.
yeah, and
And
it's yeah,
if you're also the guy who's voting on the program, Well, that seems very, you know,
Right.
I
There's a
mean, when,
conflict of interest there.
well,
Yeah.
at the very least, but it just seems like this, it's no wonder.
Hmm.
All you talk to every day is people who agree with you on that policy. And then you go in front of, on your, to vote for the policy and you're like, well, everybody agrees.
Right. Yeah, and
It's easy to get siloed.
yeah, I think especially with Metro, like we talked about before, like a survey of like a little over 1,000 people, like I think most people in this area still don't even know what Metro is. So
Right.
like, how can
Exactly.
that be representative
Of
of?
anything,
Yeah. So
and yeah, so
okay, I'm gonna move on to some of this other stuff here.
sure.
I was gonna kind of play devil's advocate here. It's
Absolutely.
hard for me to do because I've criticized Metro a lot. I think I always call it kind of another layer of government after county, city, between the state.
Yeah.
Um, but what do you say to critics of Metro who are like, why do we need this? What is this? Is it kind of what you're saying before? Like if you can connect these counties,
And yeah,
that's kind of
counties,
the ultimate.
municipalities, that is a very, very difficult question, right? I agree. And it's easy to ask, okay, but why can't the counties and cities talk to each other
Right.
if that's the purpose of Metro without this other
Yeah.
governmental entity? And, I think that it almost doesn't matter in the sense that Metro does exist. And so my feeling is, let's get people on Metro Council who are going to do the best job. Let's get people on Metro Council who are going to respond to the needs of the people they represent. And let's get people, most importantly, on Metro Council who are going to be accountable for the money they're spending. Um, Beyond that, I think any entity, whether it's a government entity or a business or whatever, can be valuable if the people who run it and are on it make it valuable,
Mm,
right? If we, yes, one of the problems with Metro is that people don't know what it is and what it does. And that's because the people on Metro Council haven't been out there enough telling people who it is and what it does. They say, why do we need this organization to coordinate stuff? Well, that to me is sort of a reflection that they aren't out there coordinating enough.
mm,
They aren't out there making themselves valuable in that way. You could say, why do we need them to do the urban growth boundary or be involved in housing, right? Well, that tells me that people don't understand what they're doing and they haven't been doing it enough. And I believe that, okay, this exists, right? And yeah, the state could do away with it. I believe there's other methods for doing away with it, but it does exist. Let's make it the best thing that it can be,
mm.
right? Let's elect pragmatic people who are focused on results, who are going to get out there and do the work and represent their districts and coordinate with different localities in order to get an overall vision of how things are going to work. And then it could become valuable,
Yeah, or
right?
even resonate with people because I think
Yeah,
right now that's one of the reasons people don't know what it is because a lot of these things kind of go under the radar, and
right,
maybe that's by design. Maybe
right,
people don't want to like these projects to be highlighted, but I see what you're saying of like if this was maybe people aren't aware of it because they don't even know the services that it could offer
right.
with this,
The
you
things that
know,
it could do that
yeah,
maybe it was set up to do and aren't happening,
right,
and so then you look at, I think the other thing that you look at with Metro that really, when the people who do know it exists and don't think it should, it's because we know we're paying a Metro tax. We know we're paying for different things that Metro does, and we don't see any results at all.
right.
You
That's what
know?
I mean. Like maybe if it
Yeah,
was functioning well, we could
right,
see those
right.
results.
And so when you look at the amount of money in the last 3 years that Metro has taken in their tax for homelessness,
Right.
$1.3 billion. And you have to look at yourself and say, is homelessness better for Metro having spent $1.3 billion?
Yeah,
No,
I believe
no,
it.
homelessness is not better. People still see homeless people everywhere. The
Right.
statistics say that there is as many homeless people now as there was 3 years ago, as there was
Yeah,
more than there were 10 years
I want
ago.
to say the recent Multnomah numbers just keep going up every
Yeah,
year, right?
every
So it's
year.
like, and they're
And,
the biggest kind
and,
of
and so,
money taker from Metro.
right. And then they distribute it to the counties, they distribute it to the
Right.
cities. And you have to ask, who's accountable for results?
Yeah.
What is Metro doing to hold these people accountable to say what you do actually has to go towards accomplishing the goal that we're setting out to achieve, which is reducing homelessness in Portland,
Right. Yeah,
right?
it's interesting you bring that up because when I was talking to Lynn Peterson, she had this, I think it probably still exists, kind of homelessness task force with
Right,
Ben West from Clackamas County, and we asked her about that of like,
right.
why do you not kind of have like measurable goals for this stuff instead of just handing the money to Multnomah County? Maybe I'll clip it in here or something, but you guys can go back and check that out. But I was going to mention really quick, like I just think it's I was looking at the SHS
Mm-hmm,
tax, and initially when it got set up, they had a 10-year goal of permanent housing only 5,000 people. And I was
mm-hmm.
just looking at that thinking, for all that money over 10 years, 5,000 is like extremely low to
Right.
me. I don't
Yeah.
know. But,
Well,
when I talked to Lynn Peterson, that she said to us, most of that money just goes to rent assistance, which to me is like, you're helping some people, but a lot of that is just you're giving checks to people, is what
right.
that is. It's not like you're
No, and but if you go to Metro's website, they talk about the construction that's going on of housing
some
units
of
and
their
all this
units.
stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they say that they're above what they anticipated and the number they anticipated building, and that's okay. That's fine as far as it goes.
Hmm.
The reality is we're not building anything, right? We're as in the metro area in Portland specifically, we're building far more fewer housing units than we need.
Right.
And the reality is I don't care how many affordable housing units Metro builds, if we don't build enough housing, period,
Hmm.
housing in the metro area will never be affordable
Right.
because it's a simple supply and demand thing. If people want housing and there isn't enough, it gets bid up,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Well, and this was probably a good segue too to like I was going to talk about the new census numbers that
mhm,
came out, which basically just the real takeaway was like Multnomah County in the whole state
mhm,
lost the most people.
right,
But I bring this up because I recently had Noah on here, Noah Blanton, who's like my housing expert guy,
okay,
and I ask him about this all the time, like why we have this supply issue. And he always makes things really simple, but he was like, look, if we had a ton of people moving here, you would see more development of housing,
mhm.
but we just don't have that. And that's reflected in the census data of like people are moving away from Multnomah County.
Well,
So I'm just curious, like your thoughts on, I guess, the census stuff and that.
I think that goes to, I think that's absolutely true, obviously, but that goes to the, when you, if you are a contractor and developer, right, and you're looking at building houses, right, whether it's on spec or for somebody,
Hmm.
right, you're looking at putting a bunch of money in over a period of time, hoping for a return. And so you have to have confidence that the demand will be there for the housing that you build, the money that you put in, right?
Even
And
if that's over 5 or 10 years.
or however much it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
And so if they look at, if someone's a developer and they're looking at metro area and or Multnomah County specifically, and they're seeing people leave, then they're going to be reluctant to invest a whole bunch of money in that area, building long-term construction projects or developments, because they're concerned about what's the future going to look like, how much are those units going to be sold, rented, whatever, in the future. And yeah, you could say, well, right, but right now there's this need, right? We all know there's a shortage of housing, but you still have to convince the private entities that it's worth taking the investment risk.
Right.
And so I think that's what happens,
Yeah, and
right?
it's also I just want to
And
point out
so,
too, because a lot of people always go, "Well, it's the developers, these a-holes," but it's like we talked about this again on the housing episode I was talking about. It's also with if you're just a family
mhm,
to build a single family home here in Multnomah County or basically anywhere in the state. I'll put the stat up again, but it's like it's a third of the cost of that is just all regulatory.
right.
So it's like who would want to move
Who,
to Oregon
right.
when you're paying,
Well,
maybe if
but
it's $1 million home, you're paying 300 grand
yeah, in
for
regulatory
just
stuff.
nothing. Yeah, it's like
And so that's a good question, but it doesn't have to be Oregon, right? It can be just metro area.
right.
Why would I why would I build in the metro area when if I go right outside of it, right,
It's a little less. Yeah.
there's less of
Yeah.
all those
Yeah.
regulatory things. It's easier to build. I don't have to deal with Peabody or not Peabody, the city of Portland
Housing group.
permitting and all that
Yeah.
stuff. I don't
Mhm.
have to deal with Multnomah County. I don't have to deal with all these things,
Yeah.
right? And then you look at really short-sighted local governments actions. Um, so we know that East Portland has been underdeveloped by the city ever since it was incorporated, right? It was all built as unincorporated county, right? You live on a road that
Yeah,
isn't
right.
paved, right? I
Yeah, and
mean,
if people don't know, yeah, there was the annexation
right,
process in
expression.
what, the 60s or 70s or
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And so what happened? So what do we have? We have huge parts of East Portland where you've got roads that are unpaved and no sidewalks and all these things. And when you interview people about what do they want for safety, right? They don't want, you know, what they're doing to all these lanes. What they'd like is for someone to come in and put sidewalks next to their kid's school,
Right,
right?
right. That's you know, honestly, as somebody who lives on unpaved, that's what
Right.
I think too. And I
Yeah.
see like the TriMet
Right.
project.
All
It's
these
like,
projects.
why don't you start having like a
And so,
sidewalk for people that don't have one,
and
or a
so,
road for
right.
people
And
that
so
don't have one?
what the city of Portland just did is said, okay, well, we'll solve the fact that the city has not invested in any of that by saying that if you build, you have to do that stuff, right?
Hmm.
Well, what does that do to the cost of the construction?
Right. They're not going to want to do that.
Why would you want to add, we don't have enough housing, let's add additional burdens to any built
Yeah.
housing because we as a city don't want to take responsibility for the lack of investment over the last 50 years, right?
Right, right.
And those kinds of things, they think, oh, look, we've accomplished this thing. We're going to get this stuff fixed because, and we'll shove it off on what you said, all those evil developers,
Hmm.
as if they're not looking at cost benefit analysis, as if they're not saying, can I make enough money building this house and putting in the sidewalk and paving the street and whatever other ands that local government wants to put on that development, right? And so what you end up with, of course, is people not building.
Hmm.
And that doesn't solve anybody's problems. And when the city of Portland said, it's not just single family housing, the city of Portland said apartment construction is down 60%,
Yeah.
right?
It's at a
60%,
10-year low. Yeah.
10-year low,
Yeah.
not since the Great Recession.
Hmm.
Well, when you have an entity like Metro and that is supposed to be involved in housing and controls the urban growth boundary and is supposed to be doing that stuff, how did the city, how did the county, but how did Metro let it get that bad? Where have they been? Where are they
Right,
talking to
right.
municipalities and talking to counties and saying, how can we stimulate development throughout the metro area? And when you have contractors and developers saying one of the reasons we're not building here is the lack of available land, and you know that Metro controls the urban growth boundary, you
Right,
have to say, what are you doing to
right.
respond to that problem if that is a big problem in construction in the metro area,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Are you looking at expanding the earth growth boundary? Because when I look at the thought of the urban growth boundary when it was created, and and believe it or not, I sort of am a fan of it because I've been to places where it's just
Sure. Sprawl,
sprawl,
yeah.
uncontrolled.
Yeah.
The purpose was not to prevent construction. It wasn't to prevent growth. It was to think about it. It was to plan it. It was, and so what I see too often is that the people look at these things like the urban growth boundary and say, well, if we expand it, it'll just be sprawl. And so we're not going to. Let's focus on density.
Hmm.
And you're like, density is great, right? We should be looking at density. We should be looking at auxiliary dwelling units. We should be looking at everything. But you also have to look at what kind of housing do people want?
Right.
And if the vast majority of people, or even 50% of people, or even 40% of people want a new single family home, right? They're not going to move into your apartment. They're certainly not going to move into your accessory dwelling unit. They are going to look for single family housing that meets their needs, wants, desires.
Yeah.
And if that's not in your area, they're going to go across the river to Vancouver. And we know there's lots of construction going on in Vancouver, right? That is a failure of those government entities to look at what not just they think the needs are, but what the desires of the people that they represent are.
Right. Yeah,
You
no.
know,
Yeah, I was gonna say I worked in a local government that's in Metro that was very more rural,
right,
and they had the same issue where it's like, very small population, mostly single family homes,
right,
and they're building homes like crazy at an affordable
Right.
price, but they're kind of stymied by, I would say, mostly the state land use
Right.
regulations that the recent laws that passed that are really density focused.
Right.
And it applies everywhere in Oregon, but
Right.
they're really like, this doesn't help us because
No, it
we're a
affirmatively.
community of single family homes and
Right.
we're a small community. And like,
Well, and that is always always the problem if you are too focused on
it's a one size
the
fits all,
yeah, the big metropolitan area,
right?
and it doesn't even fit all of Portland. It doesn't even fit all of Multnomah County. It doesn't even fit all the metro. And so when you have these one size fits all policies, what you end up with is people in Gresham, people in Troutdale, people in, all the further out places saying this doesn't work for us.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, it's not why we moved here, right? We moved here for single family, smaller communities,
Right,
right?
right.
A single family housing.
A
But
lot of people from Portland, by the way,
yeah.
moved to those communities for that
And
reason. Yeah.
it also it doesn't answer the question of, okay, what about all those people who I want to live in Portland, but I want a single family home? All right. Or I want to live in the Portland metro area, but I want a single family home. I just got married and I have 2 kids and I want an affordable starter home because I want my kids to have a yard, right? Or a dog with a yard.
Mm-hmm.
If you're just saying to those people, well, we should be like New York City, live on the 20th floor of an apartment building, that's not what they're in. If they wanted that, they would move to New York City, right? I mean, people live in this area for
Right.
what this area offers. And we have to recognize that and we have to meet those needs. And we have to look at not using the urban growth boundary to stall growth, but using the urban growth boundary to be strategic about where we have that growth so that we're building what we need without turning it into urban sprawl. But and we have to do it in a way that every single house that we build isn't going to be $400,000,
Yeah.
right? Because we pay a huge amount of taxes in this area. What, we're second to New York City, right? But our salaries in this average salaries in this area don't match New York City's for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We having people priced out of the housing market because everybody is building housing right now that they can't afford. We have to do everything we can to get the price of housing down for people. And if a huge, like you said, a third of that is administrative costs,
Yeah.
that's one place where we can say, I can turn a $300,000 house into a $200,000 house just by reducing these administrative
Right.
costs,
And it's one
right?
of those weird things too. Like it ultimately, if that works and that's successful and people build, it ultimately helps all these governments because then they collect all the tax revenues
Yeah,
and
exactly. Property taxes go up, all those things,
yeah,
because an empty
payroll
parcel
tax, all the other taxes
an
that we
empty
have. Yeah.
parcel doesn't pay any or hardly any property
Yeah.
taxes, but 30 homes do,
Mm-hmm.
and then all the empty parcels that, of course, Metro owns and manages don't pay anything in taxes, right?
It's a
So,
great point. Yeah.
you know,
Well, yeah, I always,
but the sad
go ahead.
thing is,
Yeah.
America used to know how to build housing.
Mm-hmm.
They used to know how to build affordable housing, right? We saw that at the end of World War II.
Right. And do it quickly.
And we could do it. We know how to do it fast, or we did. We know how to give people what they wanted. And we've sort of, I guess, completely lost that knowledge or ability. And part of that is because of that sense that that a lot of government people have, that we shouldn't be building that in the first place.
Right.
Right. That,
Yeah.
that, so yeah, we should want to be, I don't know, New York or other cities with a huge amount of density.
Yeah. Which is just crazy because Oregon has I don't know if anyone's ever seen this map. I'll put it up maybe, but like Oregon's huge and a lot of that's just federal land
Yeah.
that we can't do anything with.
Yeah.
But kind of along those lines, like, I brought up on the show a lot, like the urban growth boundary. And there's this great piece from the Oregon Journalism Project that was John Topanga wrote along with, like, I don't know, 6 months ago.
Yeah.
That was like, yeah, that was created in a time when we had this growth problem.
Right.
And now we don't have this growth problem.
Right.
So it's kind of like this law that we're stuck with that doesn't really make sense anymore.
I don't necessarily agree with that. Because
but I like what you were saying of like maybe think of it as like an urban growth accelerator when we need it to.
right. It was about planning.
Right.
It was about
Planning that growth.
planning the growth. It was about not letting growth just explode all over the place.
Right.
Right. And I don't think that's a bad thing. If you actually allow for the growth in a planned way,
Right.
right?
Set some boundaries and
Sets,
stuff.
say, okay, we're not going to take over every farm within, we're going to say, okay, here's this urban area, let's make it a little bigger,
Right.
as opposed to you can build anything you want for 200 miles on either side of this highway, which, you see, right?
Yeah,
We
yeah.
don't need a McDonald's every 10 blocks, right? So I understand the logic of it, but it has to be something that actually allows the growth.
Yeah.
It has to, there's nothing wrong with planning it. There's nothing wrong with saying this is how we want to grow, right? There's something wrong with saying we're going to prevent you from growing. We're going to
Right, right.
prevent you from doing
Because
what you
that's
want.
mostly what it seems to be doing.
Yeah. And what you do when you do that is you create artificial shortages,
Yeah, and there's
and
a
you and
stigma.
prices go up,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because there's not the land. And so if there's not the land, then land gets more expensive. And if land gets more expensive, then housing gets more expensive. And,
Right.
and all those things. And so,
And what I was gonna just think, like, what, because I don't even really know this, but like, what are you able to do within Metro with all this stuff, the urban
well,
growth and
Metro, like I say, manages the urban growth boundary.
right
So ultimately, right,
of the region.
of the region.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah. So ultimately, obviously, they have significant power in
Sure.
terms of how they do that. Also, Metro, going back to getting good people on Metro who are going to use it as that platform to coordinate, we can find out why there's so little building going on in Portland, what regulations there are, what things are going on, and we can talk to them and say, look, you're a big part of Metro's housing, right? How can we get more building? How can what's going wrong here? How can we as a as an overarching entity help you be in a place where more housing gets built?
Sure. Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
how can we coordinate with other cities, and how can we do this so that we can get the housing that we need in the area,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because maybe Metro can't pass some law, but maybe Metro can see how some can have an overarching view of how does this municipality's regulations affect what's going on around them within the
Right.
metro area, right? And
Yeah.
so, and how can we coordinate together so that the whole area benefits?
Right.
Because if
Yeah.
everybody is simply what works for me, right? Maybe we can be greater than the sum of our parts if they work together, right?
Yeah. Maybe like, because to me, it's like historically, it's kind of like, hey, looking at all the counties and saying, hey, this is like what Multnomah County does.
Hmm.
Instead of that approach, it's like, hey, this is working over here in Clackamas. This is working in Washington County for housing, for
Right.
example. Let's try this
But also,
here or there. And see,
but let's not say, well, Portland is the biggest entity in Metro, and the city council in Portland says XYZ, and so everybody's just going to apply that
right. Yeah.
to their area
Yeah.
because that's what they do and that's what their consultant said or whatever, not looking at why that's different, right? Exactly what you were saying about the town outside of Metro,
Hmm.
right? We're a small town, we want to grow single family housing, but all we get from the state is you have to build
Density. Yeah.
density.
Right.
That's not why
It
people
just
live here.
doesn't make sense too.
Yeah,
And you,
it doesn't.
like,
That's
when you
yeah,
visit some of these places, it's like they're just tiny. There's
yeah,
vast amounts of land, and
right,
they're just like, you want us to build ADUs and giant apartment complexes? Like, it
right.
just doesn't
I
make
mean, it doesn't
sense.
make any sense at all. And it's also, and that's a perfect example of them not understanding what the people there need and want.
Right.
Nobody who lives in Estacada is dying to live in an apartment building, right?
That's for sure. Yeah.
Right. That's not why you moved to
Right.
Estacada. I
Yeah.
mean, fundamentally. So, um, yeah, and then it all of course, ties back to transportation, right? Is we got to build housing, right? It has to be housing people want, and then they have to be able to get from their housing to the places they work, shop, all
Hmm.
those things.
Hmm.
And while they're doing all this stuff to make it harder to drive, you get mergers in supermarkets, and supermarkets go away, and Walmart's close, and all these things are happening, meaning that people, especially on the east side, have to go further to get to go grocery shopping,
Right.
have to go
Right.
further to get to because who's least likely to be able to afford to live close to where they work? The people in East County,
Right. Yeah.
right? Because
You're gonna be going further for everything.
further for everything.
Yeah.
And so then you've got people who believe that, we should take away automobile lanes and you should take the bus. The bus isn't going to serve my needs,
Hmm.
right? I can't go from my house to where the supermarket is and then go pick up my kids from school and then go back home with my groceries on the bus, right? It's not going to work.
Yeah, especially,
And
like even small and big communities, it's like a lot of like if you ever visited like industrial areas, it's
mhm,
like they're not really it's not like the hub of public transportation. Like
right,
you're usually driving to work if you work in
right,
a factory or warehouse or
ever,
something.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it always goes back to, and this is why so many people I think are enamored with Europe, not having been there, some of them, but is because it was all built differently.
Yeah.
And they really, from post World War II, invested in public transportation, invested in, you know, subways and the tube in London and all this different infrastructure stuff. And so they ended up now in a place that's better in their minds than where we are. And they want to emulate that without going back and spending the 50 years building your
Right.
tube system or your subway or your train system and your
Yeah.
bus systems and your bike lanes and all the things that they spent decades and decades doing.
Yeah. And also without the scale, to me,
But
it's
that's it.
like if you've ever visited like New York or London, those are mega cities.
Right.
That's not what is here.
But even if you go visit a smaller Oslo, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It's a smaller city. It's a more condensed
Very
city,
dense, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Which means that one, you can walk across it, right, in
Right.
reasonable amounts.
Like
I
an
can't,
hour or
yeah,
30
whatever.
minutes or whatever.
It also means that it's also flat. It's also all those other things that places like Portland aren't. The reality is that American cities are also very different in the sense that they just, oh, we're just going to build out an unincorporated county because there aren't any rules in 1950 for doing that, and then we're going to incorporate it into a city.
Hmm.
And now suddenly all these policies that work in the downtown core, they're supposed to work out here in a place that was built totally differently on a total different scale for different reasons. And,
Hmm.
it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. And so, I mean, a perfect example of that is City Hall, the city councilors who flew overseas to look at a housing development,
Oh, Vienna.
Vienna.
Yeah.
And someone pointed out, I mean, there's all kinds
The
of
first
flaws.
thing I noticed, even before they left, was like I think Vienna has like a 40% tax rate or something
Yeah.
like that. It's crazy, but
Yeah, but they get healthcare, so
yeah, yeah,
whatever.
yeah.
But so they fly over there and look at it and whatever. It's a cool housing development. This is great, right? And so you come back and someone asked, well, what can you learn from that? The first thing you can learn from that is after you have a major war that destroys half your city, buy as much cheap land as you can.
Hmm.
Now that's not going to work for Portland, right?
Right, right.
We can't buy huge amounts of land for public projects 20 years later
Yeah.
at pennies on the dollar because everything on it was destroyed
It
by
does.
a German,
Yeah, I say it doesn't really exist
it doesn't
unless
exist.
it's the gigantic Bull
Right.
Run water project
Right.
that's like
But
$8 billion or
well,
whatever.
but you see what I'm saying is
Yeah,
that they were able to do this, but they were able to do it for a bunch of reasons
right,
that were specific to the time and
right,
place
right.
that don't exist here. That don't exist here. And so, can we duplicate that? Not, no,
Probably
probably
not.
not.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, there's other questions about whether they could have learned anything they could have learned without flying to Vienna.
Right,
Um,
right.
Notwithstanding that, that's the kind of thing is you can't import things wholesale from places that are totally different.
Hmm.
We're learning that with housing. We should be learning it with transportation. We definitely learned it with decriminalization of small amounts of controlled substances. You have to not just be motivated by your ideology about how things should be. You have to be cognizant of reality.
Hmm.
And if you're not, you get all these projects that don't serve the people. They don't accomplish what you say they're going to accomplish, and that the people you represent don't want.
Hmm. And it's ultimately what I would just call as like delusional. I don't want to say like Portland's like a delusional place, but there is a lot of that going
But
on
it's not
in
just Port. I mean,
government.
that's the thing. It's not just Portland. It's up to Metro,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
why I feel it's so important to run, is because I want to be that person who says we have to be. It's focused on, is this working?
Yeah.
And it's sad to me a little bit that I start talking about fiscal responsibility and that we have to ensure that the money we spend accomplishes the goals that we're trying to achieve. And people start saying, well, you must be conservative. How did actually getting what you pay for become conservative.
Hmm.
Everybody who's in any level of government should, in my opinion, whatever they want to achieve, they should be focused on ensuring that the money they spend actually achieves that thing,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
And
Otherwise, I think it's like
otherwise, what are you
I
doing?
think you end up with stuff like what's going on with the housing bureau now,
Right,
and I've talked about this before. Like all the city councilors kind of play this blame game now at
right,
the Portland Housing Bureau, but I think it's like they all have staffs.
right,
They could have found out about this last budget cycle and said, what is all this unallocated money?
right,
But I think we have this culture of, like you're saying, nobody's interested in that accountability because it's not like politically sexy, and
right. You want to
it's not a
say,
big project
I'm
that
doing this thing.
right.
And how do I know
It's
how do you know I'm doing it? Because look at the money I spent.
right. So I think you're right. Like it's most governments up here are not focused on that until it's too late, and then they
Yeah.
go,
Well,
"Oh,
again,
what is all this money that we need a
well,
full audit?" And
well,
it's just a constant
right.
cycle of
One,
that.
you have
And
an auditor,
yeah,
so you should be being audited fairly
right,
consistently.
yeah,
Notwithstanding that, it's you. I think people are right to ask if you guys were on the job, how did we get here?
right, exactly. That's what I'm
Right?
saying. We have a
Yeah.
12-person council with big staffs, and they're all
Yeah.
highly paid, and nobody found out about this
Right.
until
Well, and don't get into the dysfunction we've all witnessed
I know.
from our Portland City Council. Um,
uh,
and that alone is I think it doesn't it just doesn't matter if I agree with you or disagree with you, right? We're supposed to be grown-ups,
mhm,
right? We're elected to achieve goals, right? We're elected to run the city of Portland. And if you can't if I don't know what goes on in a person's head where I can't even sit down and have a rational conversation with you.
right.
I can't even discuss things with you about, what we agree on, what we disagree on. How can we move the things we agree on forward? How can we compromise on the things that we don't agree on? How can we make things work for the people we represent? If you can't even do that, why are you running for government?
Yeah. I was thinking about this yesterday, this morning, because I thought this might come up if we just talked about Portland City for a little bit, but it's like I would say we're almost 2 years into this
Yeah,
new thing, the new charter, the new council, and I'm just at the point where I'm like, we got a problem. Like
it's nuts.
this is a body that basically does little to nothing except argue
Hmm.
and become like have constant impasses,
Right.
and it's a
Well,
lot of like shit slinging and stuff that
yeah,
people don't want to see,
right. And
and it doesn't help the city.
it
So
doesn't
it's
help
like,
anything. And what I hear from behind the scenes is that City Hall, the way it was described to me, is that it is the worst version of high school.
yeah, for sure.
It's a bunch of little cliques who are snarky to each other and won't talk to each other and think they're better than each other. And that attitude is all it has to be top down,
Right. And
right?
the total opposite of what you want with the government
Yeah,
too. Like nobody's talking to each other. It's
yeah.
all combative.
And what's really been disheartening for me is the my perception that so many people are looking for a reason to be offended.
Mhm.
They're look so they can score some points or they can whatever they're doing. And first of all, if you went into politics and you can't be offended, I don't know what to tell you. Like, what is the job?
Right.
First of all.
Right.
Second of all, I think that it doesn't allow people to have honest conversations. And the reason I say that is because if you sitting over there are constantly waiting for me to say the wrong thing so that you can get me for saying the wrong thing, you're not listening to what I'm saying. But two, you don't give me the benefit of the doubt that another human being deserves. Right.
Well, yeah.
And
There's a unwillingness to understand other
there's that.
people.
There's absolutely that. The reality is, if you and I are going to have a conversation, at some point in this conversation, I may say something the wrong way. I may say something stupid. Hopefully not. Um, and if all you're looking for is to be offended by that,
Right.
then the entire rest of the conversation doesn't mean anything.
Right. It's kind of
But
filtered out.
but
Yeah.
if you can say, yeah, I understand how that sounded. Right. But clearly he didn't mean it to be that way. Or clearly I'm going to let it go because the things that we're working on are more important or whatever else it is, then you can have conversations. People can say things and they're not constantly censoring themselves about, oops, I may have said something the wrong way. And that's how you get to understanding. That's how you get things done, is people having real conversations. Obviously, if someone says something very offensive directly to you, intending it to be that way, that's a different story. But that's not what I see going on
Mm.
often, right? What I see going on is somebody says something, and instantly everybody's like, oh, you said this and this and that. Well, where does that get us? Where?
Yeah.
Like,
Well, and the other thing I was gonna say, I was more thinking too, just about like that. What you're saying is totally true. There's like this personality kind of
right.
issue that creates a lot of gridlock. But even just if you look at policy in this first 2 years of this new government, it's like all the things that I see. It's like they're focused on everything but the actual issues of the city.
Well,
It's all kind of just
I think an interesting example of that is the Cesar Chavez Boulevard.
oh, the renaming
You're
stuff.
right.
Yeah.
Is we feel like, well, you can't get anything meaningful done out of city council, right?
Right.
But they can rename a street,
Right. And
and
they'll
it's not.
probably spend like 4 weeks
Yeah, it doesn't,
chewing
and it
on
doesn't
that. And
matter. I'm not at all questioning whether that's a justifiable thing to
yeah,
do.
yeah,
I'm simply saying, of all the problems that exist in our region, is the name of that street the highest priority? Is
totally.
the
Yeah.
name of that street the biggest problem?
Mhm.
Now, it's great if you can solve that, but it just shows you that they are capable of doing things, apparently just not the big things,
Yeah, yeah.
not the important things. Because anyway, and
No,
that's
I totally agree. It is it's I remember when they first changed that to from 39th to Cesar Chavez and now, but it's just like this becomes such a hot political
yeah,
issue
it's
that
sexy.
they'll jump on it
It's sexy.
immediately.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we still have the same problems we did 2 years ago with
Right,
the
right.
city
And
and
I said to my wife, the problem, I mean, one, it's interesting to focus on Cesar Chavez as opposed to, say, Jefferson, Washington, all the other people who now we see as having historical
yeah.
problems. Um,
No, that's a good point. We could
I mean,
we
you
could go
could
down this rabbit hole and do a
forever.
whole 2 years
And
of
I said to
renaming,
Liz, I said, there's a very easy way, right? They want to replace Cesar Chavez with another person's name.
Mhm.
Fine. The possibility exists, much like Cesar Chavez, so that new person 10 years from now will have something come out about them and you will want it to, because people disappoint us.
Yeah. And
People,
people make mistakes.
people make mistakes. People do bad things. I
Yeah.
mean, I'm not, whatever he did
Right.
is not, well, it's not
It
calling a
sounds bad.
mistake,
Yeah.
right? It was a bad thing.
Yeah.
But that people are not one dimensional. Do you know what would never let us down?
Well,
39th.
I know. I was gonna say, just
Let's
keep it.
go back to 39th.
Yeah, just keep it
I mean,
agnostic. Let's do numbers,
let's do numbers,
letters,
letters,
maybe. Yeah,
tree names. I've never been let down by an
right.
oak,
And it's
I
also
mean,
probably cheaper that way, than
but that's if you are going to go down the road of, we have to only have perfect people that we name streets after. One, you've got a whole lot of people whose names you need taken off of
Yeah,
streets.
yeah,
And two, right, you're going to be let down by everybody at some
yeah.
point.
There's no
So,
perfect person.
and so let's maybe stop naming streets after people, which would solve the whole problem. But, and that's not to diminish, the sense that we want to honor people who deserve to be honored, and we want those things. It's just a sense of, people are not one dimensional, right? People do great things and people do horrible things.
No, you're right.
And
Yeah.
often the same person.
I
And
think.
either you can celebrate the great thing that they did and sort of sweep under the rug the horrible thing that they did, or you just have to let them fade into history, because they're just always going to disappoint you. And so, but yeah, going back to what's more important is, that's just a great example of how we can major on the minors,
Right.
how we can get things done that really, really don't actually affect most people's lives.
Yeah.
But we can't get done the things that we need to get done. And, I see that as, it just feels like watching city council is, okay, who are the adults in the room?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because this
Yeah.
seems very not what we used to think of as adult behavior.
Yeah, I think you're pretty spot on with the high school description. I always tell people, like, when you really see all of the staff
Mm-hmm.
with city council, it's like the Wild West. And these are people, a lot of them have no idea like how governments operate, what they should do. They don't listen to the people. It's just wild. Like,
But
I think if
you're
people knew that, but some people celebrate that. Like, they're like, we want our ideological folks in there.
Right.
But to me, it's just kind of an avoidance of responsibility to have,
Well,
I don't know.
and any attitude of staff, right, is a reflection of the attitude of the person who runs it,
Mhm.
right? Those are your staff. And if they're behaving in a certain way, you're the one who says, this is how we behave, right? You're the one who sets the tone. And they're going to model their behavior after you, but also they're going to respond to what you say the rule is.
Mhm.
And so if we hear stories about staff at city council behaving in a really negative, unuseful way, then you have to sit back and say, why is that happening?
Right.
Right? Who is allowing that to
Yeah.
happen, and who is causing that to happen? And those are the people who are in charge of the staff, which is the
Yeah.
electeds.
Yeah, it's totally a reflection of that whole
Well,
environment. It is crazy, and I think that I hope it changes in 2026 a little bit. I just got a couple more Metro things here.
okay.
I was going to mention we were talking, about housing and land and stuff, and I just thought this was fascinating. People maybe don't know this, but there was a 2019 voter parks bond
Hmm.
that it passed in Metro, and um, a lot of these like areas out in the rural parts of Metro,
Hmm.
they're always like they're just kind of mystified. They'll be like, "Oh, Metro bought all this land, and we don't really know like why."
Right.
But I'll put the thing up. The biggest one they bought over 500 acres near Estacada for kind of like environmental preservation. They're gonna like be stewards of the land. But I just bring it up because it's like a lot of these communities don't really, they're kind of in the dark and they don't really know why Metro's buying like mass amounts of land. And I'm not trying to be like anti-environment. I don't know what Metro's doing with it, but it just
Well,
seems strange
to
to
be
me.
fair, I'm not totally sure what
Yeah.
Metro's doing with it. I have had actual many people who I've already talked to say that exact same thing, and
Really? Yeah.
they'll say, well, the one time I talked to Counselor so and so, his what he said was, well, Metro needs to buy more land, and when asked the obvious question, which is, what are you doing with the land you already own?
Mhm.
They didn't have an answer, right? So I understand. I mean, and Metro that's the other thing Metro does is they run the zoo, right? They run the convention center, they have some parks, all of which are positive things. But people need to know what you're doing and why you're buying land. And if you're buying land so that there's available land to build on that the Metro can later then, reserve, sell, do the things that they do, then let people know that. If you're buying land so that you hold it in a pristine state as part of your parks program, then that's not a bad thing either. But people have to know that's what's going on. If you're just sitting on a piece of land and it's going fallow, as they used
Right,
to say,
right. Yeah.
right? It's just sitting there doing nothing, and
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
not letting people know why you bought it, and nobody understands what's going on. Then you're failing on at least the education portion, right?
Yeah, and I want to be clear, they did put a press release. You can find this on their website and stuff, but it's just, I was more interested when you said, yeah, it just kind of sits idle. That's kind of what I see with this stuff. It's
Yeah,
like you buy 500 acres, that's going to take a long time to like, even if you want to be a nature preserve, like clean that up and do all the stuff that's
yeah,
necessary for that. So I just see that stuff, those 500 acres probably sitting
just
for a
sitting.
long time.
Yeah.
So it just seems strange, but
Well, and
I'm not surprised you've heard that from people though.
yeah,
Yeah.
but that is an education point, and it's one thing I think too often we see from government that, well, we put it on our website as
Right.
if that's the
Right.
as if
As if the whole world
everybody,
pulls that up every
yeah,
day and
every day
yeah.
goes and looks at your website constantly. People look at government websites when they need to find how to do a specific thing with respect to that government,
Yeah.
and way too often that's too hard to do.
Hmm.
But they're not going on there unless there's someone like you said, a government nerd who's
Right.
constantly looking, right? They're not, no one's going on there to look to see if you have a new survey up today. No one's looking on there to see what your press release was, right?
Mhm.
Um, and that's part of that. You have to be out, you have to be talking to people, you have to be in your district, and you have to be telling people what you're doing,
Mhm.
because that's how you're going to communicate with people, right?
Yeah,
And it's, but just putting it up on the website and saying, I don't understand why you didn't check our
for sure.
website. What is,
It does seem like there's a real lack of engagement
yeah,
from Metro. And I'm not trying to like throw shade at her, but even from the past presidents like Lynn and stuff, people are very like it's a big question mark. They're like, I don't know what they're doing. They
right.
don't really engage. And so that sounds great, like what
Well,
you're
and,
talking
and
about. Yeah.
the number one thing I'm hearing from Metro is what people know about them is the tax.
Hmm.
That's what they know.
Right.
It's like the arts tax in Portland, right?
Right.
Nobody knows what it does. Nobody knows where it goes. They all know that they're really annoyed by paying it,
Hmm.
right? And what I hear already in the limited amount of time I've been running so far is people saying Metro is taking my money, Metro is spending my money, but I don't see that we're getting anything
Right.
for my
Just a
money.
big question mark.
What am I
What is
getting?
that?
Where
Right.
is this money going? Who's taking responsibility for ensuring that it does anything? And people hate paying taxes. I mean, that's just a normal thing to dislike. People hate watching government spend your money, but people really, really hate government taking your money, spending it, and not getting anything for it.
Right. Right.
You know, and
Yeah.
especially I think right now, right? It's one thing when everybody thinks they're doing well and the city is growing, the metropolitan area is growing, jobs are growing, right? But what we have now is people who are really, really concerned about the economy,
Hmm.
right? People who are seeing food prices going up and gas prices going up and, other jobs not getting created as much as they used to be. And those sorts of things going on, right? And they're really, really concerned. And what do you do if you're a business in a situation like that? What do you do if you're an individual in a situation like that, right? You tighten your belt a little bit and you make sure that the money you spend is you're getting value for it,
Right.
right? And so in an environment like that, when you see a government taking money and spending money and you don't see a return on that, right? Or worse yet, you see things getting worse. You see homelessness getting worse. You see housing being less affordable. You see streets being done in ways that you don't want them, that affirmatively make your life worse. And you think to yourself, how is this possible? Right? Where are the people who are saying, like I am saying in my personal budget, we're going to make sure we get value for your money.
Mm.
We're going to spend it and we're going to accomplish things. Not we're going to spend it and we're going to fund a program. Not we're going to spend it and we're going to give it to a nonprofit or we're going to give it to the county with no restrictions. It's we're going to spend it and things that we said are going to happen are going to happen.
Hmm.
And I just think that it's so important, and people expect or have a right to expect that if they are being cautious and careful and with their money, that when somebody takes it from them, that person should be cautious and careful with their money. And I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation, right? If you tell me that fatalities are going to go down, they better go down if you're spending my money. If you tell me homelessness is going to go down, it better go down if you're spending my money, right?
Hmm.
But you get a diversion center where they're employing far more staff than they're actually helping people
Right.
get diverted, right?
Right.
What is
Yeah.
it now? 70 some $1,000 per person who completed one thing,
Hmm.
right? It doesn't take an average person much time to look at that as a colossal waste of money.
Yeah.
But it's not government's money. That's what government tends to forget. It's not government's money. It's the money that people paid in taxes, whether that's
Hmm.
federally or state or local, right?
Yeah.
It's their money that you have taken from them, sometimes because they voted for it, sometimes because it's necessary. There are programs you have to run and all those things, but treat it with that level of respect,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. No, it's a, I would say it's like beyond a chronic issue. It's something I've talked about since like the first episode I've done of like very generous people paying taxes in services that don't show up. They're not
Right,
reflected. People
right.
don't see it. And I still feel that way. Like we talked about the city a little bit. Like I think we have the same issues we did 2 years ago. Nothing's really changed.
Nothing.
In fact, now, I bring this up a lot recently with the loss of population, the loss of jobs. Multnomah County's had like several quarters of negative employment. We're in a recession, according to local economists. The city's in a recession.
Yeah.
And that's just kind of the state we're in. And but yeah, and it frustrates people more when you're in that environment and then you're paying out all
Yeah.
this
And yeah,
money.
yeah,
Um,
exactly. When you're saying, okay, we have to we have to change our spending behaviors because of the reality we live in,
mhm.
but you don't see government changing its spending behaviors based on the environment we're living in.
Yeah.
But the perception there's that odd perception when people talk about government waste that there's this sort of department at waste and you can just cut it, right? The reality that is though that the waste occurs when you spend money on projects that don't achieve results,
Mm,
right? That's wasted money.
right.
And that's not a department you can cut because there's not a department of waste, but it's an attitude that you should be changing,
Mm,
right? It's that attitude of I'm funding a program, right? Not I'm achieving a result.
right.
I
Right.
don't care about your program. Your program, either if you come to me as a non-for-profit or you come to me as part of a government division and you say, we need X gazillion dollars in order to do this thing, the first question should be, okay, what's the result going to be?
Mm-hmm.
How is that not the first question? How will I know that you did what you said you were going to do? Right? And also, when are you going to admit you were wrong and that it failed and that we should choose some other program or some other goal? Right? Because the answer is they never admit that they failed,
Right.
but they also don't ever seem to achieve what our overall goal is, right? Our overall goal is to reduce homelessness. Our overall goal is to increase housing capacity. Those things aren't happening.
Yeah.
But they're spending the money.
Yeah.
They're spending the money. And that attitude of it's the program that I'm worried about. So I funded this program and I can go now and say, oh, I funded this group and look at all this work we're doing. Right. The
Yeah.
ditch either
Yeah.
gets dug or it doesn't get dug.
Right. Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. I know you're a big you've been involved with Peabot a lot. For me, Peabot's like, people ask me sometimes like, what's your least favorite bureau? And it's probably Peabot because they have the biggest debt. Like it's
mhm,
like I think like $7 billion in undeferred maintenance.
right.
And it just keeps getting bigger. And it's like they're a prime example of me of like what you're talking about of like they'll keep funding these other projects and this massive thing is just growing behind
Right.
them of that nobody wants to deal with. And
Eh, But I think that's goes to like what fundamentally are your core services,
mhm,
right? And this is, something that I learned at one of my first jobs. And I think if you're in business, you learn this really clearly, right? Which is you can't do the extras
right, yeah,
until
right,
you've completed the core
yeah,
part of the job.
yeah.
So,
My friend Eric Fruit, the comments he's coming on, he always says we don't have Disneyland money. Like
right. but
we
also,
got to take
we
care of
don't,
the basics
but
first.
also we can't do what Disneyland does,
Right,
which is just increase the amount you charge people until you have all the money in the world,
right, yeah,
right? That's not what we want from government, right? And um, yeah, it's time for that to be different. It's
hmm
time for that attitude to be different. And I think a good example of that, right? We elected the city elected a mayor
hmm
who said, I'm going to solve homelessness in a year. Well, it's been a year, right? Has he given his apology speech and said I was wrong and said, wow, I didn't understand this at all. And this is a lot more complicated than I
right,
thought it was.
yeah,
Of course not.
yeah. And honestly, and I'm a somewhat of a fan of Keith's team. They have some good people, and I like a lot of the things they do. But I'm like after the year mark,
Uh-huh.
and also right now specifically with I believe it's Sunstone Way or some of these shelter providers that have like gone bankrupt or
Yeah.
had issues.
Yeah.
They're having to close a lot of city shelters. So I'm growing more worried about like this shelter apparatus that he's built out, kind of
Collapsing.
not collapsing, but maybe getting a little smaller.
Well, but again, it's that goes to, and now, I mean, we're getting more back into the city
Yeah.
part of it, but that goes to what are we doing to
hmm
solve homelessness, right? If what we're doing is building shelters to house people, right, that doesn't solve fundamentally anything except for that small group of homeless people who are going to use that shelter to then get, you know,
All the
now I have an
services they
address and now I
need.
can get a job and now I can
Yeah.
do whatever. But
Right.
if the reality of homelessness is far too often substance addiction and mental health services, then building all the shelters in the world isn't going to solve that, right? Because it doesn't address why people are homeless.
hmm
And so you will just be housing them until the money runs out for the shelter and then the shelter closes and then they're back on the street.
hmm
Um, and so then you have to ask yourself, okay, would we have would we spend our money better addressing the root causes rather than just housing people?
Right.
And when we look at the amount of money that we're spending on homeless spending, whether it's through the $1.3 billion for Metro or through the county or through the city, and you're looking at, as I said in my last campaign, and it's still true, and probably more money now, where we're talking $60,000 to $65,000 per year per person.
Mm-hmm.
Well, someone pointed out that that's far more expensive than virtually any treatment program that exists.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You could go to Betty Ford for a month for less than that. And that's you could be with all the celebrities,
Right.
right?
Right.
So why are we spending those kinds of numbers? We're not getting to the people, right? Obviously that $60,000 isn't going to each homeless person,
Right.
right? Clearly,
It's not like they get a salary
because
of,
we could literally
yeah.
buy them houses
Right.
for have a mortgage and pay their mortgage for less than that every year. And so would we be better off spending some of that money on just putting people into treatment programs? Would we have been better off building a treatment facility, right? As opposed,
Yeah. Yeah.
those sorts of
Yeah.
things.
Because
But
it's, yeah. I mean, I tend to agree with you on most of that stuff because it's like, no matter even if it's shelter or housing,
right,
I've known a lot of addicts in my life. I've done a lot of drugs in my life. It's like, it's really hard to maintain a job when you're addicted to like
right,
hardcore drugs. Like, and
right,
that doesn't
yeah,
matter if you're in a normal house or in a shelter, like
right.
you need stability in your life. And that comes with treatment and all
But
that other stuff.
but this is the ideological problem, of course, which is the ideology is housing first,
Right.
and
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that it isn't working.
Yeah. And I always
And
say the government's here still to this day, they will barely even mention addiction. They like tend
yeah,
to ignore it. They think that it's not a real
well,
issue. And
this is the part of the problem, going back to what we talked about of people looking for inadvertent offense,
yeah.
is that you will hear people say, well, we don't want to stigmatize homeless people.
Hmm.
So we don't want to, you can't say that they're addicted to drugs, or you can't say they have mental health problems. And the problem with that is that it means that you can't discuss reality,
Right. Because people
right?
see that every day with their
Yeah,
eyes.
I don't have,
And
so they opened a shelter kitty corner from Radio Cab's building,
mm.
and to their credit,
Is that the one that's getting sued, or is that a
I couldn't tell you. We're not
okay?
suing them yet. But
I know there's one in the
we were
Northwest.
very concerned about the effect that would have on the neighborhood,
Right,
and
right, yeah.
that they would allow camping. And we'll see what happens over the summer. But I have to say, in fairness to them, they've been very good neighbors.
Okay.
But the first day that they opened, and they people leave at like 8 o'clock in the morning. So I get to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's this homeless lady walking down the middle of the street, right? Just yelling at the top of her lungs,
Mm-hmm.
right? And walked around for probably 10 or 15 minutes. And I mean, first of all, you see traffic fatality issues possibly happening, but notwithstanding that, to look at that and say mental health isn't an issue that needs to be addressed with respect to this person getting the help that she needs to get off the streets would just be to deny reality.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not stigmatizing her, right? It's not, all it is saying is we have to recognize the reality that this person, of the issues that have caused this person to become homeless, and we have to address those underlying issues, or she will always be homeless,
Right.
right?
Where I was picturing, I had a family member that had schizophrenia
Yeah.
who's no longer alive. But even if you put that person in like a single family home,
Hmm.
they're still going to need like three people to help them just live their life,
Yeah.
and at least if they can recover, get back to that.
Right. And that's reality. And the other reality is that we're hearing stories where buildings that, I'll pick on Central City Concern, that are managed by Central City Concern, where it's housing first, right? That's all they care about, housing first. And so
Mm-hmm.
you put drug addicted people in there, you put mental health people in there. And then what you hear is, okay, the top floor is where the brothel what turns into the brothel. And the second floor is like a drug market. And because there are people who will prey on people who have addiction issues and mental health
Sure.
issues,
Yeah.
but also people, if you put a whole bunch of people who are addicted to drugs in a single place together, then you're going to have somebody come in to supply that that demand. I
Right.
mean,
Yeah.
and so that housing first model, it just didn't work. It isn't working if you have that kind of thing going on.
Yeah.
because those people are only in that place because it's available and they don't, but they're not moving towards a better life.
Right. Yeah. I
They're
see.
not improving their existence. They're this is when they talk about people who are homeless, but it's sheltered people versus on the street people. If the goal is to get people to not be homeless, and you're counting those people as homeless, they're always going to be homeless
Right.
because you're not doing anything about the underlying issues
Right.
that are causing them to not be able to function.
Yeah. And I believe, maybe if I can find it, I believe there's a stat that's like 60% or something that do have addiction issues.
Hmm.
And if you're just not like addressing those,
Right.
that's what you're saying. You're just treating a symptom of that problem,
Well, and
which is that they don't have housing, but that stems from their real
but
issue.
this is and I've said this before,
And it's an argument that's probably going to go on
forever.
forever. It's
But
like,
my experience is very few people never had housing.
right,
Right.
right. Yeah.
Now, there are people absolutely who lost jobs, lost the ability to pay for their housing, ended up on the street. And those people, we know statistically, if that's the reason they're homeless, they're most likely to be homeless for a very short period of time, take advantage of services, get back on their feet.
Yeah.
And that's great.
And
That's how it should work.
they're, from what I know, in the minority of the
Absolutely.
larger number. Yeah.
But if every story I've ever heard, like you knew someone who was addicted to drugs, I know someone who became addicted to drugs. What you find out is they had housing,
Hmm.
right? And then their drug addiction made that go away. And then they surfed on somebody's couch for a while. They weren't homeless, but then the person couldn't tolerate them anymore because of the way they were with their drug addiction.
Right. Yeah.
And they'll bounce and bounce and bounce from one living situation to another living situation, alienating those people who are willing to help them until they have no other choice. Right? They have no one left nowhere
Right.
left to
All
go.
those connections of,
And so
yeah.
that says to me that if you just put them back in housing, they had housing at one point. The underlying problem is what caused them to be homeless. And you can put them in housing, right? But that underlying problem is going to cause them for that not to be a stable location, right?
Yeah.
That's not going to bring stability to their lives. If it did, they would have been fine way before they ever became homeless, right? Because they actually had housing at that
Right.
point,
Right. Right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's such a complicated issue, but it has to be addressed with your eyes open, your willingness to call things what they are,
Yeah.
your willingness to say, no, drug addiction is a huge problem. Mental health is a huge problem. And that doesn't stigmatize homeless people. It means we have to address those problems.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hope that, if you're able to make it to Metro, because from what I know, the last kind of state of that was they were trying to model what Clackamas County did, which is
Mhm.
very treatment focused,
Right.
and bring that to, some of these other counties, and then and not be so Multnomah County centric,
Right.
because what they were doing for a long time, to me, didn't work.
Well, but Metro, by virtue of the fact that it's distributing money, has the ability to tie that money to outcomes.
Right. Yeah.
They have
Right.
that ability. They have that's leverage,
Yeah.
and say, we want to give you money to solve this problem. Tell us how you're going to actually
Yeah.
solve the problem.
Rather than just handing the money.
Passing the money on to
Right.
some not-for-profit organization. And then you have to
It's
look at,
like,
so
it's like throwing a penny in a wishing well. You're
right.
just kind of like, I hope that,
But you have to look at it like the deflection center,
yeah.
right? You're paying how many staff members in the deflection center, right?
Yeah.
Those people are all making money off the money from this pot of money that goes to
Mm-hmm.
dealing with homelessness, right? So you're spending far, far, far more money employing people, which is great. People need a job, I suppose, but then you are actually helping homeless people become unhomeless.
Right.
You
And
know,
for a lot of people that's in government, unfortunately, like from my experience, they're more looking to check that box of, hey, we pushed the money out the door and hired people,
right?
than the outcomes.
The outcomes, and that's exactly right, and
So,
that's
but yeah, I'm glad you're looking to change that. I just got a couple more things. I did want to really quickly mention. I thought this was cool because I lived near it for a long
Mhm.
time, but I didn't know for a while that Metro kind of manages and oversees Lone Fir Cemetery, which is over in Southeast
Okay,
Portland.
yeah,
And when I was in my 20s, it's just like, it's near Belmont and stuff. A lot of
yeah,
young people walk through there
yeah.
and kind of do fun stuff in there. But I just thought that was cool. I didn't want to like trash Metro the whole show.
No, I don't. I
So
don't.
I thought that was cool.
Again, if Metro didn't have value
Yeah.
in my mind, didn't have potential to have greater value, then why wouldn't I be advocating to get rid of Metro,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So yeah, Metro does. I mean, who doesn't love the zoo,
Right.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, Metro does good things, and there's no doubt they have great people working for them. It, it's it's about making sure that all the things they do achieve positive results.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and like I say, it's I come at it from I mentioned this before the last time we talked. I view myself as a progressive person. I view myself as somebody who believes that government should be providing public transportation, that government provides services to its citizens to improve their lives or to do things that individuals can't do or businesses isn't able or unwilling to do because it's not profitable. Um, but that you still have to actually accomplish the things.
Mm-hmm.
You still
Mm-hmm.
actually have to do them. And when you see instances where your government does do things that work and you realize that it can be done, right? They're not the enemy, right? They're people who will have abilities in the government agencies. There's people who have intelligence and talent and want to do good work, right? We have to make sure that the leadership is focused on the same thing, which is let's accomplish results, let's do good work, let's make sure we're accomplishing things. And going back to the thing about PBOT, let's make sure that we're filling the potholes
Right.
before, or paving the streets or putting in sidewalks before we look at doing the grandiose
Right.
projects, right? We have to do
Putting the
the
gondola in or
right.
whatever
We
it is.
have to do the unsexy stuff that
Yeah.
is the business of government,
Right.
right?
I
And
always say keep the trains running on time.
right,
The basic,
right, absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's what, because that's what people expect and they have a right to expect. It's the big projects and you get to pose and you get to have your picture in the paper or on the
Right. The
news,
ribbon
right?
cutting.
No,
Yeah.
that's all great.
Yeah.
But if you're not ensuring, whether it's PBOT who's deferred all this maintenance or whether it's the Parks Department that deferred all this maintenance so they could do bigger projects, right? If that's what you're doing, then you're fundamentally failing,
Mm-hmm.
right? You have to do the fundamental basic government functions first. Because does building a new park um, genuinely affect my life very much? It depends on where it is,
Mm-hmm.
right? Honestly. But for the most part, what affects my daily life is the fact that you haven't paved the street.
Mm-hmm.
What affects my daily life is the fact that you took away a lane of traffic and now the road that I use to get where I need to go is a parking lot. What affects my life is, you've deferred all the maintenance on the parks you already have. And so they're not safe places for, my neighbor's kids to play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you've cut corners on public safety so the max feels like a dangerous unclean place to go. Those are it's not sexy, I
Yeah.
get it,
Yeah.
but it's the work that needs to be done. And then when you do the bigger projects, make sure you're actually getting what you're paying for,
Mm-hmm.
but also make sure you're actually doing what your constituents want.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, that's
Yeah.
yeah, I mean,
No, it's all
I
great
think
stuff. Yeah.
I think that's when you look at things like you say, like Lone Ferns. I've been there for their Halloween tour. It's
Yeah. They
really
do
good.
fun stuff.
They
Yeah.
do good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I think that like I say, I love who doesn't love the zoo, and they do good work, and it's a lovely zoo. And I've been to look at the ride the train for the lights and the
Holiday. Yeah. Zoo
holiday
lights.
lights,
Zoo lights. Yeah.
zoo lights in the Christmas time, and it's great educational stuff, and there's all different things, and so that good work can be done.
Mm-hmm.
And let's get someone on Metro, hopefully multiple people on Metro Council who are interested and committed to making all the work that Metro does that kind of good work,
Absolutely. Yeah. And stuff that people want,
yes. Well,
instead
I
of stuff
mean,
they don't want.
not stuff that they don't want. I think that government, yeah, obviously Reagan made the joke about the worst thing people want to hear is I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. But the reality is that so much of what we want from our local governments is to make our lives better,
Right.
easier, safer, cleaner, right? And they're letting us down in so many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And let's make that different because it can be, right? It
Yeah.
can be.
Yeah. Hell yeah. I got a couple goofy things
All
here.
right.
Unless there's anything else you want to mention about all this stuff.
That's
I
all
mean,
right.
I know there's a lot, but
I know. And the interesting thing, I think our discussion reflects it, is the interesting thing about Metro
mhm.
being the on top, a local government on top of other local governments, not in a hierarchical sense, but just
Right,
in
right.
a geographical sense, is there's specific things that Metro deals with, but it becomes enmeshed with all the different things that the counties and cities within Metro are doing, and that's why, just to repeat, it's so important, I think, that the people who are elected to Metro Council are very, very out in the community, out talking to people, out letting people know what Metro does, but also interacting with all those local governments and interacting with all the other stakeholders so that Metro can be a facilitator of making the Portland metro area and all the municipalities in the Tri-County work together to improve everything for, not everything for everybody, but to improve all the things that each individual government entity is trying to do. Because
Mhm.
we really, if we work together, we can accomplish more than any particular entity can accomplish on its own, because we're so intertwined,
Mhm.
right? It's,
Mhm.
if you drive east, you don't know when you've crossed from Portland to Metro or Portland to Gresham unless you know where that line is. Clearly, the way those two governments interact is going to have a significant effect on those people where in that blurry
Yeah,
area in
yeah.
between.
Mhm.
That's true if you go in any direction. Where does Tigard become, you know, Portland, or where does Hillsborough become Tigard, or whatever? We have to all work together
Mhm.
because those lines, to a degree, are artificial, right? A homeless person on one side of that line or on the other side of that line, we have to address all of it together.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I would say also for, like you're saying, kind of serving the community and what they want and not like cuz I'm just personally so tired of like people coming to these positions from like they just want to help the nonprofit that they came from. You
Well,
know what I'm saying?
and I mentioned that
And I'm not
with
saying like people work for them still, but a lot of times they leave these
no, but
highly paid positions and they just,
Metro Council
you
is
know,
a part-time position.
yeah.
So literally,
Mm,
some of them still
okay,
do
okay.
work for the not-for-profit that
Right, right.
they, and that's,
And
and
that's allowed in that
yeah.
environment. Okay. Yeah.
And so, you have to look at that, who are you actually on the council representing?
Right.
Are you representing the people of your district, or are you representing the not-for-profit that,
The board. Yeah.
the board of the not-for-profit? Are your ideas solely coming from the not-for-profit that you represent,
Yeah.
or that group of not-for-profits that really forms a huge, powerful political base in Portland? Or are you, when it comes to that conflict, which way are you going?
Right.
You know,
Because a lot of these places get grants from
at
the state, metro, the
yeah.
city, the county. So okay. Um, I got a couple funny things here. It's funny. Like a month ago or so, I was driving by. I was gonna ask you what your dream car is, but I was driving by an old, like your old taxi that I think
Uh-huh.
got destroyed or like somebody hit it,
Oh
right?
yeah,
Or
my Crown Vic
yeah,
that I got
I drove
T-boned
by
in.
one of those and I was like, oh, I remember when Noah had that old cab. That was cool.
Yeah,
But do you have like a dream car or something that?
I'll tell you, if I could get any car, I would get a Mach 1 Lotus Ford Cortina.
Okay, I don't even know what that is. Is that a?
So in the 60s,
It
Lotus
sounds fast.
Lotus it's probably not anymore, let's be
Okay,
fair, right? It's
yeah.
a 60s car, you know. Lotus was building twin cam heads for Ford engines and using them in racing.
Okay.
And so Ford of Europe, of course, also was racing. Sedan racing or touring car racing is very big in Europe. And so they were racing. And so they came to Lotus and said, let's get together. You're building these twin cam engines using our Ford blocks. Let's put them in a sedan, or, and let's go race. And it'll be a tie-in together, right? And so what they did was Ford would ship body shells to Lotus's factory. Lotus would put their engine in it. Lotus designed the suspension,
Mm.
because that's one of the things Lotus is very good at. And then I think they shipped it then back to Ford to put specific interior stuff in it or whatever, and then they went touring car
To
racing
race 'em, yeah.
and did really well. I'm a huge fan of Lotus. I'm a huge fan of Colin Chapman, the man that
I've never
created.
even heard of Lotus. It sounds
Oh
cool
yeah,
though.
um,
They make engines or customize engines?
cars. No,
Oh,
Lotus is a car company.
okay, okay.
Yeah, so it was founded by this man Colin Chapman, one of my sort of heroes in life, because I have a great respect for people who figured out what it is they wanted to do in life, and then just did it.
Yeah.
And he was one of those people. And the fact that he was sort of an engineering genius is, on top of that. But um, they're tiny cars.
Is
Tiny,
it one of those
tiny.
European,
You're a
like,
tiny
small
little
cars?
European
Okay.
sports cars.
It's like a Fiat or something.
Yeah, in size. They're English.
Okay.
Lotus. And I can't fit in any of them. Let's be honest. Lotus. I think Colin
These are
Chapman.
two-seater cars?
Most of them.
Okay.
Yeah. Colin Chapman, I think, was like 5'3" or something. I
Okay.
mean, he was anyway. I can't fit in any of them. But the one Lotus that I probably could fit in is the Lotus Ford Cortina,
Okay.
because it's based on a Ford
It's a
sedan,
Ford
a Ford
body.
two-door sedan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Okay.
anyway, but it's got all of the great Lotus racing heritage and all of,
That
it's
makes
so
sense,
so
yeah.
that's sort of
It's
my
got the engine and all this like of a race car, but
yeah,
it's the regular
right.
body.
So that's sort of my dream
That's
car.
cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. Yeah, I'll put a photo of it up here. And,
Okay. Mach 1. It's very important.
okay,
The
the
Mach 1.
Okay. Is there
'Cause
2 and 3 and
Yeah,
stuff?
because Ford, you know how cars evolve over time. So the Mach 1 Ford Cortina has a very specific look. And then in the late 60s, early 70s, they redesigned it. And that was the Mach 2 Cortina. And they also partnered with Lotus. The Mach 2 is an ugly car. I'm sorry. The Mach 1
They
is
changed too much of the
the Mach 1 is cool. The Mach 2,
Okay. Okay.
not my thing. So there you go.
Yeah, I also wrote down dream bike, but that was more for like Eli, who was here last time, and
Because he's a
he's a bike
bicyclist
cop,
guy.
and he's a bicycle cop, and
Yeah, that's
he
right.
has some nice bike. I can't remember. I always think of Specialized as like the high end bikes, but he had some
No,
other
no,
thing
the
or something.
there's handmade. I am not a bicycle.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I'm not
I don't
either.
dislike bicycles.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I rode them everywhere.
Yeah.
But now I'm too fat and too lazy, and
Yeah.
and I got into cars and
No, I don't.
and motorcycles and all those other things.
I'm the same way. I haven't owned a bike in years, but I can still ride one if I want.
Yeah, exactly. I could get on one if I had to.
This is kind of new. I've only asked it once. This is a really goofy question. Could a dog with 2 paws working together light a Bic lighter, do you think?
Could a dog work a Bic lighter?
Yeah.
Bic lighters are really thumb centric.
Mm-hmm.
They're very opposable thumb
Got that
centric.
safety thing on there.
Yeah. So I'm going no only because they don't have opposable thumbs.
Okay.
I have known some dogs that if they could work a Bic lighter would probably burn down a house. So we're,
More capable.
if it's better off
And they could- and they
it's
could
better off that they're not capable is what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
And that dog could open the door and leave.
Leave. Yeah. No.
Okay.
Anyway, I love my dogs, but I don't want them operating Bic lighters.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank goodness they can't, I guess.
Exactly.
Is there a animal or creature you're most afraid of? Most people always say some kind of bug or snake
Really?
or something. Or cougar. I've got cougar.
Cougar's a good one. I don't spend a lot of time. That's a hard one because I don't spend a lot of time thinking about like what animals
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's some people who like have very clear fears around animals.
Well, it's funny because people always kind of get stumped on this, and I was thinking, for me, like an easy one that we're never around is like a polar bear, because they're like one of the only animals on the planet that hunts humans.
Do you think of yourself like? Do you think
I'm not in that environment?
No, but exactly. You're like I don't go around. I don't go around thinking, "Wow, I'm scared of polar bears."
I would just be like, if I ever saw one not in a zoo environment, I'd be like, I'm probably gonna die.
I will say this: the ones that, and this goes back to bugs, but it's not specific ones. Those ones that like when you're asleep and they lay eggs in you, and then later later their like offspring break through your skin and come out. Oh,
that'd be awful. Yeah,
scare is a strong word, but I don't want it to. I like
sure. That's a
pretty
good one. That's a good one.
Those are scary animals that I think.
Yeah.
Really.
Okay.
Yeah.
I see this probably last time, but is there a local business or restaurant or something you want to shout out that you had a good time at recently?
I will shout out Pizza Baron on 122nd. I love those guys, and I've had a couple of campaign events there.
Nice.
And
I'll have to go. It's good pizza.
It's good. It's how I would describe it is, and other people have described it to me this way, and I think it's accurate. It's pizza parlor pizza.
Nice,
So when you
nice.
think
I
about
think
like
yeah, it's a
an old time
specific
pizza
environment.
parlor,
You got those
and
nice
it's got the,
glass lamps
yeah,
and
it's got all that, and it's got all kinds of stuff on the walls, but it's also that type of pizza was, it's sort of got a thinner, crispier
yeah.
crust that's sort of like cornmeal a little bit,
It's
and
like maybe described
I,
as tavern pizza or something like that, or
yeah,
yeah.
you could describe it like that. They're really good, and they've always been super nice. And like I
Okay.
say, I've had a couple of campaign events there when I was running for city council. So that's a great one. I love them. We go to the observatory quite a bit, which is up
Mm-hmm. It's like
on
82nd,
Stark,
right? Yeah.
just south or just west of 82nd.
Yeah, yeah.
We love those guys. There's so many good. Every time you ask a question like that, then people feel bad for
I
all
know the
the
ones you
restaurants
leave out. Yeah.
that we leave out.
I
But
was gonna shout out because I've been going. I'm gonna go again here soon to Sailor's Country Kitchen. You know that
oh,
place?
so I went there for that's literally right up the street from my house.
Yeah.
I had never been. They held a year ago, we held our the board members radio cab, who are just cab drivers, get one of the compensation for being on the board is like a big board dinner, and we go to
Oh yeah.
someplace nice. And
Yeah.
so they always invite the superintendents. And so we actually went to Sailors, and yeah, that's a
I
great
just
place.
like it. It's
That's a
like an
great,
old school kind of place that I
absolutely,
like, and there's a huge
absolutely.
parking lot which I like. It's
Yeah,
easy to get to, and
yeah. No, it's absolutely true. And it was
they
delicious.
got good steak.
Oh,
Yeah.
you got good steak. You
Yeah.
can't, and so we spent too much money on the company dime, and I got the steak and the lobster. So
Nice.
that is a good place.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna give you a chance. Like, what's the website, and can people donate? I don't even know how it works with Metro.
Yeah, so absolutely you can donate.
Okay.
And please,
Yeah.
please donate. No.
Send them in. Yeah. Send in your
No,
donation.
please donate
Yeah.
if you think that, I'm the things that I've said are the type of things that you want to see from a Metro councilor, then please donate to the campaign. That's how we get the message out there. And obviously we're hoping that this will be decided in the primary on May 19th. So if we're going to get stuff out before the primary, obviously we have a really short time to get together the money to do that. My website is Noah, Noah, the number 4, metro.com. So very simple.
And you can
The donate button is right
okay.
on there. You can
Yeah.
donate there. You can, come and see me at Radio Cab Superintendent's office Sunday through Thursday and donate money in
Oh,
person
there you
if you
go.
want
Yeah.
to. I'm
Yeah.
happy to take, there's a little form you have to fill out because of the tracking requirements for donations. But there are no matching funds for the Metro race like there were for city, or like there is for city council. So that also means there's no cap on donations.
Mm-hmm.
So,
So if you want to write $100,000 check,
oh, if you want to just fund the campaign, that's obviously,
yeah.
we would love that.
Yeah.
But the reality is that every single donation
Yeah.
makes a difference, and every single one, I'm as appreciative of the person who is able to give $10 and gives $10 as I am of a business that gives 5,000. We hope for both, obviously, but it's everybody is important. Everybody it's like, yeah, you're just equally important, right? Because you're willing to say, I'm willing to put my money where my beliefs are. I'm willing to give a little to help make a change in my local government. I want to participate in the process. And if what you're able to do is a very small amount and you do it, then it may be harder for somebody to give a small amount than it is for some other person to give a large amount. And yeah, they're absolutely, I said this to you, I think in our last conversation, is that I am constantly humbled that people want to give me money to help me run for office,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because, I view myself as a person who's just trying to make a difference, who's trying to put myself out there. I, and the fact that other people hear me and say, hey, I want to support that is just, it's a really humbling and powerful thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so,
Yeah, if you like what Noah's saying, donate to him. I was gonna say, obviously, it's like to me, it's the metro races are kind of like not on people's radar, and I'm just saying that to be like put it on your radar
yeah,
because a lot of these other races get attention. This one is pretty important too, I think. So
yeah,
don't
absolutely.
let's put
Absolutely.
it
And
on the map a
I
little bit.
appreciate you saying that.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think that, there, because if for no other reason,
Yeah.
because of the money that they spend,
Yeah, and
they
if
should
you're
be on your
yeah, I
radar.
was gonna say if you're unhappy with kind of some of the things that happen in Multnomah County and the city and or even Gresham and some of these other places, like
Right.
this is a way to kind of like put your money to another government that could change some of that.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
so cool. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for coming. You're always welcome back. I hope the primary goes well in May.
I do
Yeah.
too. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then maybe I'll come back and talk to you
Yeah.
again.
Yeah. You're always welcome. Yeah.
And
All right, man.